Hey guys, big day in the workshop today. We're smashed for work here, but we thought we'd do a quick video on this 500EXC that we've got in this morning. This one is actually going to be set up for the Finke Desert Race. Now the Finke race is a hallmark race in the Australian racing calendar for off-road, and it's fairly unique in its demands. It's a 250 kilometre desert strip that you'll charge down on the on the Sunday, and then come back on the Monday on the Queen's birthday weekend. It occurs every year, and it's a big event, and a lot of people always have this race on their bucket list, and it's something that they want to do once in a lifetime. Now with the setup for these bikes for the Finke Desert Race, it's quite unique. One of the things that you really want to do, you really want to have a steering damper. This one has a Scott steering damper mounted to it, and it has a unique rubber mount setup on this one, and basically it's going to control fatigue, stop a lot of the front wheel deflections, and if you're going to put a damper on your bike, do not waste your time putting anything else in there. Put a Scott's. They're generally regarded as the best off-road damper you can buy, and I 100% recommend them. Now with the desert race, there's a lot of high-speed snotty stuff, and basically getting that front wheel right is critical. So we want to have the correct springs, the correct damping outcomes, but we need something that's really going to absorb the bumps. Now on this EXC, they have the latest twin chamber forks, and the twin chamber fork is a great step forward. KTM have produced some dogs over the past 10 years, but this is a major step forward as far as fork technology goes. They're very similar to the KYB XSS system. The one thing for these particular setup, whether it be KYB, whether it be the WP, they have the spring reservoir on it, and that is always going to be a source of friction. And in this particular race, we want something that's compliant, very, very supple, and something that's going to be less fatiguing to the rider. So what we'll be doing with this one is we'll actually be fitting the Dal Soggio XR Kit to it. It's a complete reservoir transplant, and these are available for both the WP and the KYB forks. And basically we change this reservoir setup, and the level of plushness that you get out of this is amazing. Okay, if you've got one of these bikes, you're not happy with the way the forks are going, put one of these in there that you'll never look back. And we're going to be setting this up because this will allow us to get a lot more for the bike, from the bike, for the rider, for this particular event. Now, Finke is one of those races where you really want to stand up where you have to and sit down where you can. And so very, very important that we make our seat a lot more comfortable. And so basically we'll be putting a heavier seat on this so that we'll have a lot more padding so that the riders can basically sit down as much as they can and save their energy. The biggest thing about Finke is you need to get down to the end of it in the best possible shape so that you're ready to charge back to the following day. Now with the EXCs, the latest shock, very, very slow on the rebound. We've seen this, it's a bit of an issue. It comes out of the factory like that. There's not much you can do about it. You're not going to get a good one. You need to change this. And so to get those supple wheel reactions, we need to make the rebound circuit much, much better. We've been over the EXC shocks in the past, and we'll have another look at this one today. So let's pull it down, let's get into it, let's make these changes, and let's create a much nicer bike. Okay, to the bench. Okay, so we've got our forks apart, we've taken the pressure mechanism off the original cartridges, and we're going to be replacing it with the Dal Soggio XR Kit. Now the XR Kit is beautifully machined. It also incorporates a preload adjuster, which is very, very handy. But more importantly, it has the bladder pressure mechanism. Now the difference between the bladder and the spring primarily is friction, and so it's that friction that's actually going to inhibit our wheel response. And so if we look at the drag that's in this, okay, it's significant. It's not small. It's quite obvious, and that drag comes about because there's piston and seal, and it's backed up by a pressure spring. Now this is not unique to WP. This is the same as you'll find in a KYB XSS system. It's in the Showa system, etc. And this Dal Soggio kit will not only do the WPs, but it'll also do the KYBs. So if you've got a KYB fork, put one of these in, you won't regret it. It is a massive change. The difference is not small. But what's going to happen with the bladder, rather than having any drag, because the bladder is just basically a bladder filled with gas, what will happen is as this fork compresses and oil gets pushed into the reservoir, the bladder just squashes, and then on the rebound stroke it'll basically expand. So there's virtually zero friction with this, and so our wheel response becomes a lot more supple. It's a lot more inviting to the rider. It feels a lot nicer, less fatiguing, and it's a massive change. This is not a small thing. You're not going to hop back on the bike and think, oh yeah, that's a bit better. You'll hop back on the bike and think, well, why don't everyone do this? This is crazy. It's that big a change. Why don't they all do this? And I don't know. But beyond that, we're also going to increase the wheel response by basically drilling some holes into these tubes above where the seal sits, of course. We don't want oil pissing out on us. And what will happen, we have a bushing that sits at the top of this tube, we have a bushing that sits down here. On the compression phase, what will happen is that gap between those bushings rapidly expands. Now, this gap is filled with oil, and it's a very, very close tolerance. There's only 1 millimeter gap. And so what will happen is as that expands, we're actually creating damping in between these two tubes, and it's inhibiting wheel response. So by producing a vent hole basically between these tubes, what will happen is our oil flow will be dramatically improved. Our fork will respond both on compression and rebound. We'll find we'll get improved grip levels and improved comfort. So we're going to get to that, and we'll talk about the shock in a minute. Okay, so we've got the shock absorber apart now, but before we get into that, there's one more piece that I want to talk about with the standard fork, and that is the original spring seat. Now, this is actually a fairly soft plastic, and they are not very durable. They do tend to split. So we'll actually be getting rid of this, and we'll replace it with our own machine product, which is going to be a lot sturdier, a lot more durable. We won't have any braking issues. Now, when it comes to the shock absorber, basically what we're going to do is, I think you got that, did he? Jasper. Okay, so let's have a look at the shock. Now, with the shock absorber, first of all, we're going to replace the piston reservoir. We've actually already put the bladder reservoir on here. We're going to put the bladder in there, and yes, that's going to give us improved wheel response, plusher feel, more grip. It's a big bonus. Now, there are still those people that will bag the bladder. They're the same people that used to burn the witches at the stakes, I'm sure. You know, it's a mentality that the intellectual person cannot fathom. You know, it goes against basic physics, and you know, this thing will be an improvement every single time. Now, with this shock, there's quite a bit going on. It's, instead of being a single piston shock like a standard Japanese bike or even some of the early European bikes, now we have a dual piston setup, and basically there is a little cup in the end of this shock absorber, and what happens is as the shock goes further through its stroke, this top piston with its shim stack will actually enter into that cup, and it will give us additional damping, and it'll create some form of damping progression. It's not highly controlled, it's not as good as the old PDS system used to be, but anyway, it's something, it's there. And so, because we don't develop the progression that we would like to, we actually put a progressive spring on this bike, and it works much, much better. So progressive spring is going on, and as we spoke about before, the rebound damping is hampered on this machine. And so they have a rather convoluted setup on this bike, and basically they're creating what we'd call a rebound separation valve, but it does require an element of bleed and a lot more control than what they have here. So what we do is we drill a larger hole to allow the rebound to be more effective, and we actually put a little step washer in here. We build another shim stack on top of that, and that will actually go on to top of that face there, and so we can develop a lot more rebound control, much nicer wheel response, much nicer flow. We are also going to put a extension onto this shock shaft, and that basically, by creating that extra 2 millimeter in height, shaft height, not only are we going to get more travel, but it puts the swing arm in a much more beneficial position, and so we get much better acceleration from the bike, much better stability under gas. And so the rest of the shim stack is quite normal. We will obviously revalve it to suit this rider in this application, and by putting the progressive spring in, we can actually reduce some of the reliance on that secondary shim stack, and it becomes less abrupt as it goes through the stroke. So we'll get more grip, more control, more comfort, and rider will be happier. Okay, here we are back at the bench. Jaden's been busy and he's done our holes in our tubes for us, and he's also machined up the spring spacers. Now, one of the things very, very important with the holes, if you're going to put them in the tubes, I mean, there's a great gain to be had. It also prolongs seal life, which is very, very beneficial. But what we do is we normally locate them about 170 mils down from the top of the tube, and we always make sure that the hole is directly in line with the axle. And by doing that, by putting this hole directly in line with the axle, it's actually in the midpoint and in the position of the least amount of stress. Now, these tubes bend when you're hitting bumps. So if you hit an impact, it's going to want to bend the tube backwards, and that will consequently actually stretch the material on the outside of the tube, and it'll be compressing the material on the back of the tube. If we have a slap down landing, well then what's going to happen is the tube is going to want to bend out, and we're going to find that compression will be on the front of the tube and the extension will be on the back of the tube. So by having these in the midpoint, we're in the position of the least amount of stress. Now also, while Jaden was on the lathe and buffing these tubes and machining the holes, basically I had him machine up some new plastic spring spacers as well, or spring seats. Now the old one, as I said, it was very, very flimsy, okay, and they do tend to break. The new ones have been made out of acetal. This is far, far more durable material. It's also got very good bearing qualities. It's chemical resistant and temperature resistant as well. So a lot going on with this material. Now, one of the things that we noticed when we pulled this apart is we had negative preload on the springs. Not exactly what we want. So we've actually made these a couple of millimeters longer, and so that'll take up the spacing in the fork, keep the springs from rattling around, and give us a lot more control. So we try to cover everything while we've got it all apart. Okay, so here we are, we've got our gear back together. We've got the Dal Soggio XR Kit in these forks. We've done our tube mods, we've put SKF seals in there. Obviously we've revalved and reconfigured this shock. It's going to work a hell of a lot better. We've got our bladder system on there, so we've done everything we can to actually get this guy across the line in the best possible shape. And of course we've got the right stickers on there, so that's an instant lap time reduction right there. Now, when we set up bikes for Finke, as I said before, it's very critical we look at other factors, and so a lot of people put steg pegs on their bikes. I'll put a steering damper on there. Must have the padded seat. That's definitely a hot ticket item. And one of the things that we do is we get up to Finke and we actually dial our riders in at the side of the track. So we don't just leave them go and they're out under their own steam. We basically go out there and we help make sure that they're right on the day and they get through that race meeting in the best possible shape. And so we'll get this back in the bike now. We'll get him back out in the track and we'll test him before he leaves here today. But more importantly, we'll test at Finke, and he'll be on his way, and hopefully he gets through the race with no problems, and finishes further up the field than what he hopes. Okay, thank you.